Hello and welcome to this webinar today. This is the last of this year's season of the Zero Waste Europe live webinars. We'll be back in October with a new season and new topics, so we'll hope to see you all then. And if you're not familiar with our organization, Zero Waste Europe is a Brussels-based NGO which works on advocacy at the EU level and to achieve a zero waste society. But then we also have a big network in different parts of Europe where the national NGOs and our members, they work on changing the national policies and implement different zero waste solutions on the ground. And the Zero Waste Cities program, which hosts this webinar, is a program which aims to transition cities of Europe to better waste management. And we are already working with more than 460 cities in Europe. And today, our focus is on textiles. Textiles are problematic in several ways. First of all, there's the upstream impacts. For example, cotton takes massive amounts of water and lots of land to cultivate it. And of course, there is the impact on chemicals to dye them and process them. And then on the other hand, the second big textile fiber is polyester and other synthetic man-made fibers. And they are basically made out of fossil fuels. So lots of problems on the upstream side of it, on the environmental field, not to mention, of course, the social aspects as well. And then in the end of life, it's not problem-free either. On average, one European produces about 11 kilograms of textile waste per year. And currently, it is quite challenging to get it into sensible use. There's, for example, quality issues that makes reuse really challenging. And then, of course, the mixed fibers in one textile piece and the chemicals that are added made even recycling quite challenging. And even at the EU level, the problem has been recognized. EU has quite recently launched a textile strategy trying to solve this problem, and in 2025 there's mandatory separate collection of textiles entering into force, forcing different member states to start dealing with the issue. And today we are looking into this, and the key points that we are trying to answer here is what are the challenges to make circular economy happening in the field of textiles. We are also looking into the data needs that might make circularity in the fashion industry much more feasible. And finally, we are also looking at an example from Finland where there is already separate collection of textile waste and also processing facility, and hopefully get some inspirations from there. And our speakers today are Urska Trunk, who is a campaign manager from Changing Markets Foundation. She has been working on different fashion-related campaigns since 2017. Our second speaker is Tracy Kinden, co-founder of TextRoad, who has vast experience in the different parts of the textile supply chain. And since 2013, she has been working more on the textile waste, recycling and circularity through different hands-on and multi-stakeholder projects. And the third speaker today is Sini Ilmonen, who is senior specialist on circular economy and co-creation at Lounais-Suomen Jätehuolto in Finland, which is a public waste management company operating in the southwest part of the country. And she has years and years of experience working in different kind of circular economy development projects there, trying to solve the textile waste problem there. And she's also one of the founders of the Telaketju network, which is behind these big nationwide solutions that she's presenting today. And then a few general instructions on how this webinar will work. Each of our speakers will have 10 minutes to present their work, and then we have time for a few questions specifically for that speaker. And in the end, we have some more time for questions for all of the speakers at the same time. And you can submit your questions through the Q&A function on Zoom. So please just anytime submit your questions there. And if you want to say hello to everybody and introduce yourself, you can use the chat function for that. So let's not delay this any further and let our first speaker to start presenting. So welcome, Urška, once again, and the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kaisa. Thank you for the introduction. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully this will work. Is it okay? You can see my presentation? Yes. Up. Still? Okay, I think now it works. Yes, so my name is Urška. I'm a campaign manager at the Changing Markets Foundation. We are an NGO that was set up with an aim to accelerate solution to different sustainability challenges in various sectors. We run what we call market campaigns with an aim to expose and put an end to irresponsible corporate practices. And we do so, for example, through on-the-ground investigations into textiles factories, supply chain research, and so forth. We have been working on specifically on the fashion industry and more widely in the textile sector for almost 5 years now. And we currently have a campaign running called Fossil Fashion, which is highlighting the fashion industry's huge reliance on fossil fuels. And I will do my best to answer kind of the first question of the webinar, which is what makes circular economy challenging today. So to jump right into it, I think we can all agree that one of the main challenges with today's huge clothing waste problem is fast fashion. But this throwaway model of consumption paired with low quality clothing that are not made to last is namely possible because most of our fashion today is made from fossil fuels. It's made from synthetics, which are produced from oil and gas. Synthetic fibers today represent 69% of all fiber production. And this is dominated by polyester, which is present in more than half of textiles we use today. So we can say that polyester is kind of the lesser known enabler of fast fashion. It's cheap and it allows brands to produce a lot of clothing, and on the other end for consumers to buy a lot and dispose of it more easily once either the fashion trend change or the garments were out. So just to portray this correlation between synthetics, the growth of synthetics and fast fashion, here is this graph. At the very bottom, you will see natural fibers. The one in green is cotton, which you can see has historically been the dominant fiber up till about 2000, when polyester overtook cotton as the most used fiber. And this is also kind of the period known as when the fast fashion trend truly took off. Specifically year 2000 is also marked by H&M opening their first flagship store in New York. And since that point on, you can see the use of polyester, so the one in pink, exponentially growing, while the use of natural fibers have remained fairly stable. And this is why today we have, this is the reason we have fast fashion. We are now where you can see the black vertical line, that's actually 2020. But in this period, so from 2000 to 2014, not only the use of synthetics doubled, but the use of the production of clothing in general. And from this point on, you can see the projections, which are even more concerning, according to our research, in the next 8 years now. So by 2030, almost 3/4 of all our textiles will be made from fossil fuel-based synthetics. That is, if the fashion industry continues with business as usual. So the trends, they speak for themselves. We're buying more, we're throwing clothes away faster. We're buying 60% more than 15 years ago, but we're wearing them half as long. And yeah, we're buying more because it's cheap, and it's cheap also namely because clothes are made from synthetic fibers. This is example from our report called Synthetic Anonymous, where we have analyzed online shops from 12 fashion companies ranging from sports brands to luxury, fast fashion, high streets, and so forth. So we have analyzed more than 4,000 products and found that 67% of them contained some type of synthetic fibers. But on average, an item would contain 53% synthetic composition, meaning that more than half of it would be made from fossil fuels. And you can see that in some cases, for example, H&M, they use even more synthetics in their conscious collection than in their main collection. So why is this problematic? Of course, the reason that was just stated for synthetics actually being and will continue to be the driving force behind fast fashion, but also because, as Kaisa mentioned, we have a huge overconsumption problem in Europe. And once we are done with our clothing, the collection rates vary significantly between member states. But the fact is that most of textile waste will end up as waste incinerated or landfilled. And because the reuse and recycling are not really considered at the design phase, 1/3 of textile waste is completely unfit to be recycled back to clothes at the end of life. That said, much less actually is. Less than 1% of clothes today are recycled back to clothes. And this is due to also the lack of technology today available to recycle on a commercial scale, but also the difficulties of separating complex blends. Again, these are some examples from our research into online stores, where we have taken 3 items. You can see all 3 of them are made from 5 or more fibers, which makes this, impossible to recycle at the end of life. And just to say that these items were taken from brand sustainable or conscious collections. So it actually begs the question how something that is actually destined for landfill can be defined as such. So we really have a huge lack of accountability in the sector. Still, fashion brands today mostly rely on certification schemes, on voluntary initiatives, or they turn to greenwashing tactics and false solutions, such as, for example, using plastic bottles. If you walk into any store today, you will see items advertised made from recycled polyester, but these items are actually made from downcycled plastic bottles, which is actually a far cry from a truly circular business model. For one, because these bottles can actually be recycled back to bottles. We have now systems in place for this. And secondly, because these items can never be recycled back and are actually destined for landfill. What our research found is also that at the same time, brands are really not making enough investments into truly circular solutions, such as fiber-to-fiber recycling technologies. So this is where the EU strategy comes in, which was published in March this year. We welcome it. We welcome that it also really establishes it recognizes a clear link between fast fashion and fossil fuel-based fibers. The Commission proposes several measures, which I will not go into. I just want to touch on one central one, which here is harmonized EU extended producer responsibility. So just to briefly explain, an EPR system or extended responsibility is kind of enforces a polluter pay principle. It would mean that it would be producers that are responsible for the costs and management of end of life of clothing they put on the market, instead of, for example, municipalities and by extension, citizens. We have earlier this year published a short policy brief called a new look for the fashion industry, and it's actually based on the research done by Eunomia. This is more like an idea piece, what an EPR system for textiles could look like, because we know we have several national-based ones that are not fit for purpose, are not successfully working. And we have identified some of the key ingredients that would be needed to even make an EPR efficient. We do see that some elements would need to be harmonized at the EU level, such as targets for waste prevention, reuse and recycling, but also criteria for eco-modulation fees. So these are the fees that producers would have to pay to place items on the market. These fees would, of course, have to be high enough to actually drive real change and not just perpetuate the status quo, and would need to be high enough to actually cover the cost of collection and the reuse and recycling targets. Of course, this should never be just a recycling scheme, but it needs to respect the waste hierarchy, meaning that always waste prevention, repair, reuse need to be prioritized. As mentioned before, it should also disincentivize any false solutions such as downcycling of PET bottles to clothes, and instead really support closed loop recycling options. Of course, transparency and due diligence are key just to ensure compliance in this area. And because my presentation, of course, is about clothes, but we don't only have clothes, we have carpets, we have mattresses and other textile groups. So there would have to be different systems in place for different textiles groups. But I want to mainly touch on the last 2 points in a way that an EPR could also be a tool to address overproduction problems or drive the fast fashion away. And we see that this could be done, for example, through progressive fees, for example, linking the fees to the number of items placed on the market. For example, a brand would get a bonus by placing less items each year, or employing good practices such as repair and reuse. And also because, as demonstrated, the overproduction problem, the fast fashion is so deeply rooted on reliance on synthetic fibers. We do propose a virgin plastic tax because this would be a way to drive this reliance away from fossil fuel-based fibers and create a level playing field. That said, of course, we don't see EPR as a silver bullet here. We know that end-of-life management is not sufficient. It needs to come hand in hand with strong criteria for eco-design. So the EU needs to make sure that, you know, the clothes that are produced are of quality and are made to be repaired, reused, and at the end of life, at the end of this line, recycled fiber to fiber. We also see that, you know, fast fashion has no place in this circular economy. So the EU must make sure to slow down the overproduction. But in a nutshell, as said, we've seen that the voluntary initiatives do not work, and we really see that we need regulation in this space. So thank you. I will end my presentation here.
Great. Thank you very much, Urška. If anyone from the audience has any questions about this piece, please feel free to use the Q&A functions. We have a few minutes to take some questions at this point before we move forward. Maybe one question there is about, like, recycling is one piece, but then what about the reuse phase? Is there something, some regulatory things that could especially target the easier reusability and repairability of textiles that you have identified?
Yes, definitely. And yeah, I didn't have time to really touch on this, but we really think that there should be kind of coherence between the EPR and the eco-modulated fees and the eco-design criteria, because of course the waste prevention starts with the design of clothes. So the way to do it is to set really strict criteria on how clothes should be produced, and in a way, for example, set criteria that a part of the material composition needs to come from recycled content or reused content, because only if we actually start setting criteria at the start phase, we can actually tackle the whole problem. So yeah, end of life is not sufficient in this case. And also just to say about reuse, because of course there's a huge problem with collection and sorting, but also the fact that there's a huge problem of a lot of what is defined secondhand clothing then ending up in developing countries. So we really need to make sure that sorting is done properly, and that any low quality textile is retained in the EU and is not sent then to secondhand markets elsewhere, because we are getting more and more evidence that developing countries are actually burdened by these. For example, in Ghana, 40% of textile waste that is sent there to be sold at a secondhand market is actually waste. So it's just going to be landfilled or incinerated there. So we are basically offsetting our problem to somewhere else.
Great, thank you. There's a question from the audience asking if it is in reality possible to have the modulated fees in the EPR high enough to really drive change in the producer's behavior.
Yes, sorry, you said producer's behavior. Yes, I mean, I think this is the criticism that we have heard many times from existing national EPR systems, that they don't work because the fees are not high enough, and they just kind of perpetuate status quo, and there's no incentive for the producers to actually produce items in a certain way. So this is up for the EU to actually set the criteria straight and the fees high enough. I think if this is set at a harmonized level, then this could work.
Great, thank you. I think we'll leave the rest of the questions for the after part of the webinar. And then we should move on with Tracy and more of the data-driven approach to circularity of textiles. Please, the floor is yours, Tracy.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Tracy Kinden. I think we can skip the introduction. Kaisa did a great job, so appreciate that. Data, that's really been my focus, especially in recent years. And you'll see a few different figures here than Urska presented, and I will try to speak to those. But if you have questions additionally, please let me know. Textiles have a big problem, obviously. We see in current reports about 5.4 million tons of textiles are purchased by consumer households in Europe. So this is your clothing, your household textiles. This is what the current trade statistics tell us. And over half of that goes directly to waste after the first user. So, and again, you saw some figures in Urska's presentation. And depending on whose data you're looking at, somewhere between 30 and 45% of those materials that get collected, or that get, 30 to 45% of the materials that are put on the market, get another loop, but it's a loop in the linear system. So essentially what happens is that all of the resources that get put into the system in the first place go to waste. Now, we have a political mandate and we have a climate imperative to actually fix this problem, to go from a linear to a circular textile industry, but we need data to do that. And the data that we need to do that is pretty scarce. Either it's not accessible, or it's not accurate, or it just simply doesn't exist. And so this is creating some challenges for us. Now, we look at this through the lens of the separate collection mandate that's coming in 2025. Talk about policy as or political mandates policy-driven mandates. The separate collection by 2025 is a big one. There are two things that are really pushing in textiles right now in Europe. The first is the sustainable and circular textile strategy released earlier this year. Really good, 14 pages plus a couple of annexes. So if you haven't read that one, definitely do. It has some pretty bold statements in it. The second one, and this is where I've been focused more in the recent past, is the separate textile collection mandate. And what this is going to do by 2025 is absolutely, it will increase the quantities of textiles generally, but specifically post-consumer textiles that are collected and pushed into current markets. Now, the current markets for reuse and recycling really are not set up to handle a drastic increase in quantity. So what this means is that we need data so that we can adapt those materials flows and increasing quantities that start to circulate, not just collected, but are circulating through the system, that can be done in an economically viable way. This is not simply a question of collection and recycling. It really is about circulation of resources. But if we want to understand the limitations of the linear system and address the roadblocks to circularity, then we need some really basic information now, and that is quantities of materials flowing in the system. We need to know about the quality, the characteristics of those materials, and what the end markets look like, size and such in the current system. And if we have that information, then we can start to really do some meaningful work to get to circular textiles. Now, the challenge with this is that the statistics, the publicly available statistics we have, are 3 to 5 years old in some cases. They're really labor intensive to get. They do not tend to be comparable between different member states. So a lot of good, smart people that are working on this, but even the best reports that compare multiple member states will say, yeah, these are not necessarily comparable figures. So they're not comparable, and the data sets that are available, they're really full of holes. The data is tricky, and I have one really concrete example. Urska showed a statistic about 600. I haven't gone through and read all these citations, so I will go back and check it out after this call. But her statistic was 675 million tons of raw materials. And I'm not sure what that was referring to, but if we look at what Textile Exchange is listing as the total, total fiber market, textile at the consumer residential level, as well as floorings and technical textiles, all these things, they estimate, depending on the year, somewhere between 100 and 111 million tons. So we have all of these different and various figures that we're trying to use to solve big problems. And it's pretty tricky. Now, the good news is that some of this data, especially addressing the separate textile collection issue, some of this data actually exists. It lives in individual company databases and softwares and digital platforms. But the challenge with that data is that there isn't a single company or a single set of this data that really shows the whole picture. And the information is in silos. It's not shared and exchanged in a really broad way. And that's unfortunate, because if we were to combine the data from regulatory reporting systems and inventory softwares and transport documentation, all these little sources, if we were to combine that, we could actually quantify an individual company's contributions or impact within the circular textile industry. And we could develop accurate statistics and metrics to push the transition to circular textiles, and we could do it in near real time. So that's a pretty exciting utopia. And the challenge is that we need some incentives to actually get that data flowing. And incentives, I think you'll be hearing that word over and over and over at many, many levels over the coming years. But incentives are either market-driven, economic, or they're policy-driven. Couple of examples here. This is obviously not a complete list. And if you're in this world at all, you realize that the economic and the policy incentives have quite a lot of overlap. But effectively, the situation is this: we need incentives to get the data flowing to help solve the circular textile challenge. And we also need incentives to get the physical movement of materials moving in the right way. Those are very economic driven, but we see policy incentives being on the table as well. So we need incentives to get those two things to happen, but we need the data to make good incentives. So the risk that we're running into now is yet another chicken egg scenario where the lack of data is holding us back from everything else. So what we really think is important from the textile perspective is to put the emphasis on getting the minimum, most critical data starting to flow, especially between municipalities and post-consumer textile entities in the immediate term. Because if we look at this through the lens of the separate textile collection mandate, the municipalities and post-consumer textile entities, these are the companies that collect and sort and redistribute textiles. I would also put CINI and LSJH in that bucket because they're getting very much into textiles, obviously, from their participation today. So municipalities and these post-consumer entities are actually the ones that have to do the heavy lifting, create the collection systems, develop the materials flows and figure out their way through markets and material circulation in a different way. So if we can get them collecting standardized data, exchanging basic information, then we can start to do some really interesting stuff. Now, data, what does that actually mean? We classify data in a couple of different groups, and really this is not rocket science, this is basic stuff. And the materials flow data that I'll talk about here, the good news is that actually exists for the most part. Materials flow data is pretty simple. It is what are the total amount of materials that are floating around, what's put into the market in the first place, how much of that gets collected, how much of the collected materials, now this is very much in the post-consumer context for the purpose of focus. So how much of that material gets collected, how much of that collected material is reused, recycled, recovered, there's a legal definition there that's a bit different than a few other things, but recovered, and how much goes to waste. It's not very difficult to get this information. It requires some trust and some standardization, but you can basically get your hands on this information. And so here's a really concrete example of where that comes from. If I am a post-consumer collector or somebody that's bringing in these materials, I have information about the flow of materials in terms of quantity, tons. And if I'm developing a relationship, a collection partnership, or fulfilling a partnership, a collection contract on behalf of a municipality, then the most important data to share between the municipality and the post-consumer entity is how much material did I actually collect from the total municipality. Ideally on a monthly basis, but at a minimum on a quarterly basis. And this keeps the knowledge and information about what's going on with materials flows happening between municipalities and post-consumer entities. And then on the other side, the flows out from the collection system. So how much of the materials that get collected wind up in reuse channels, how much go to recycling channels, and how much actually goes to waste. In an ideal world, every municipality would have their own set of statistics for those three end destinations. But in reality, it's not important to get that granular today. Just like from a municipality perspective, collectors should really be tracking every individual collection point and what's coming through those in terms of quantity. But it's not a necessary bit of information to get to the minimum viable status. And it's not necessary to share all that data with the municipality. So at any rate, if these post-consumer entities are simply taking the information that's in their existing system and sharing the basic information with municipalities, then everybody starts to get on the same page. We can then overlay this with system data. So system data is, for example, what are the collection methods that get used? How many collection points are there in a certain area? What's the density? How many people are we serving in this area with this specific collection point density? And then you overlay that material flow information with the system data, and you start to unlock a lot of interesting stuff. Now I'll go back to that in a moment and how you actually apply that, but I'll give you one more piece of information that's important. Material flow information, super critical. System information, very, very critical. Product data is also exceptionally important, and Urska did a great job of sharing some of the details around what's in our product and how that's problematic. The digital product passport is going to make some more of this information available, but that fiber composition piece is the most important transitional bit of information that will take us from simply improving collection and textile management systems into being able to unlock information for recycling, for design criteria, and all of these other components. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned fiber composition as one of the most critical pieces of data to focus on now. But back to the example. So if we look at system data and material flow data, and I'm a municipality working with the post-consumer entity to create better and more effective collection systems, I have really concrete evidence of what's working, what's not working, and I can start to understand how I can either support what's working in my current system or change what's working or what's not working, and increase the amount of materials collected and potentially have a more effective system in the end. The other interesting bit that doesn't get talked about a lot is in some cases, the data can show when the municipalities actually need to create and provide more support for post-consumer textile entities, offset some of the costs of collection, because sometimes actually, and I can give concrete examples later if you're interested, that actually needs to happen. So data really unlocks a lot for the municipality, and it unlocks a lot for the post-consumer entity as well. Now, these companies are collecting a lot of this information, they're using a lot of this information, but when it starts to inform relationships and contracts and developing collection systems together in a municipality-based relationship, then everybody gets on the same page. Difficult conversations become easier because they are evidence-based, and expansion or changes within a system also have the evidence to support them. So that's these are really cool things that can happen simply by collecting and sharing really basic information between different parties in public-private partnerships. If we can manage to even get basic data flowing, we start to build bridges and we replace the barriers that are really going to hold us back from a circular textile system. I've given some concrete examples of just around collection, but if we start to also think about the product information and the fiber composition information, then we get to that next level of not just, as I said, collection and sorting and end markets today, but how do we create and design products that can be recycled? How do we make products more reusable? And ultimately, where I'd like to see us get to is that we're actually using fewer virgin resources to be able to clothe ourselves and can take care of the basic needs, even some of the nice aesthetic fashion-based needs, and doing a much better job with circular textiles. So bridges, not barriers. And I'll give you one more bit of information about this specific topic. At Texford, we're actually doing a project together, a program together to do this data exchange between municipalities and post-consumer entities. And so if you have questions about how we're putting this into practice or would like more information generally, please do let me know. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Tracy. And yeah, any questions for her? Now is a good time to pick a few before we move on. So we have just heard that there is a huge need of data, and especially for the data to flow. Can you share some examples of a part of the chain or maybe a location where this is already starting to happen as kind of like an inspiring example to look up to? Sure.
Yeah, sure. So over the last 12 to 18 months, Texford has been working in Estonia. We launched there. And what we have learned is that actually, especially more rural municipalities or smaller places that surround some of the population centers need some help with putting together collection systems that will work. So what we're doing now is we've identified some really basic textile collection flows. So bin-based collection, event-based collection. So the truck will come, drop off your clothing in this place on this day at this time. Bin-based collection, event-based collection, and then a little bit more innovative reuse center setup, what we're doing with them is we're helping them collect standardized data on those collection streams. We're helping them understand a little bit better where that goes. So basically just giving them the very standardized information they need to collect. We're bringing that together, doing some analysis together with them and their partners on the post-consumer textile side. And then we're developing best practices for what other municipalities, both in Estonia and beyond, can do. So if we were looking at these systemic data points, the collection density and people served, all these things, we're looking at the effectiveness of the collection methods themselves, then we can start to package that up and share that forward with others. So that's one example.
Great, thank you very much. And if there are any other questions for Tracy, we can also come back to them in the end of the webinar. But now I think it's time to move on. And like we have heard already earlier today, 2025 is the year when all the member states will need to start to collect separately textile waste. And this is already, the preparation for this has already started quite some time ago in Finland. And today, Sini will explain how it's happening and maybe some learnings and inspirations from there. So please, Sini, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm Sini and I'm working for a municipal waste company here in Finland. And a few words about our company. So we are municipal owned, 18 municipalities are our owners, and we are located in southwest Finland. We are about 100 employees, and we take care of a little bit over 400,000 citizens' household waste. And textile is one of the waste we are taking care of. So it's one of the 30 streams. And at the moment, the household waste fraction is under municipal responsibility. Of course, as Urska said, we don't know what the EPR brings in the field. We decided to start collecting post-consumer, like end-of-life textiles, and that includes both reusable textile and textile waste. And why is that? Is because we know that the citizens doesn't really see the difference between reusable and recyclable. So we want to work with circular economy principles and still save the reusables from the fraction. Until now, most of the textiles end up the energy recovery in Finland. So any of the textiles are not going to the landfill anymore, but still to energy recovery. Our vision is very, very humble. So we try to find the best circular solution for all the end-of-life textiles. So we are not happy if we find a good solution for just few of the fractions, the easiest fractions that can be recycled, but we want to really find upcycling, circularity solution for all that can be found. But we understand that the fiber-to-fiber circular system is not, it's not possible for all the fractions. So we need many industries and many different kind of solutions. We made a textile flow report, and as Tracy said, the data we could collect is already, even we did this report last year, the data actually is much older. So it's really an issue to get the updated data and from many different sources. So not only the municipalities, but also the charity companies and the private sector. However, we figured out that it's about 11 kilos per capita in Finland also that we throw away every year. And still in the energy recovery, there's a huge amount of textiles that we should save. And how we do that? So we have in Finland about 30 municipal waste management companies, and we all are together building a collecting and sorting network. And all of the companies have already funded and engaged to this development work. And we are building a national-wide operating model, and it means that regionally all these municipal waste companies are collecting textiles from the area. They are pre-sorting it, and usually they are doing collaboration with the local charity organizations. And our aim is that all the textiles collected in Finland is sorted by the same instructions. And when they are pre-sorted in locally, they are sending the textiles to the southwest part of Finland to our facilities. And the high quality collection chain prevent that the textile doesn't spoil during the collection. So especially in Finland, we have very rainy and cold weather. So the textile gets humid and mold very easily. So it's really important to collect them properly. As we all know, I think the separate collection comes in mandate in EU 25, but in Finland it's going to be already at the beginning of next year. So we have built this network already 3 years now, and our aim is that all the municipal waste management companies are in the same system by the end of this year. We get the support from Kivo, Kiertovoima organization, who is a roof organization of all the municipal waste companies. So they are supporting with the communication and do the national-wide campaign also to citizens that all know about the collection. A few words about the sorting. So there is a first mandate pre-sorting that all the companies need to do in their area, but then they can choose to which level they want to sort. So they can take the reuse out of the stream if they have a local collaboration for that. And then they can sort further for recycling, or even do material sorting by using NIR identification technology. And as I said, we are sorting by circular economy principles. So we really want to take out all the reusables out of the stream. And why the local pre-sorting should be done close to the material, we reduce the transportation costs, so it doesn't make sense to send a huge batch of textiles from Lapland to south, and then we see that all are ruined, for example. And we also support the local employment and the infrastructure there. We are proposing that there could be a sorting hubs also organized by municipal waste companies together. And also we are supporting all to close collaboration with charity companies, because we think that when the quality goes to 2 different streams, there's a reusables only for charity companies and recyclables for us. That supports our both kind of organizations. And we want to see this like a holistic solution. And I can't emphasize enough the sorting, how important the sorting is. So even there would be a technology and automation for sorting, we still need people there. They can see the purity of the material. They can see if they are reusable, like the very valuable vintage. and they can easily see the elastine content. They can also sort by color or texture. And end of last year, we also invested in a mechanical fiber opening line, and we are very happy to work together with Rester, who has own line, and we have also own opening line. We are taking care of the household textiles, and Rester is taking care of the B2B sector textiles. Textiles, for example, like workwear or textiles from hotels and so on. And here is one picture about the actual line we have in Finland now operating. And the volume or capacity of our line is about 5,000 tons a year, and our joint capacity is about 12,000 tons a year with Rester. So we produce from out of the post-consumer textiles, we produce a recycled fiber for companies and industries, and also for research. And there is a few of our kind of end products that we can, and everything starts from the sorting, of course, and what we put in the line. So there is a cellulose based, and then it's a hand sorted cotton. Then we can, with this NIR identification technology, we can identify like cotton, viscose, wool, linen. Then one of the fractions is denim, and also we have some synthetic fibers, and also, as I said, we can sort by structure or by color. And if you are interested on any of these materials, I'm happy to hear from you, and I'm happy to send you some samples. We have also some future plans. So we got funding from Business Finland, and we are now planning to build bigger processing plant in Turku in Finland, and it should start operating in 25. So the capacity will be scaled up, and the costs are big, but I think it's very necessary when the market will need more and more recycled raw materials, and also because the European collection, it's gonna start in 25, and when our line should be ready by then. And here is just a picture about the comprehensive system I just presented. So there is a collection and pre-sorting. Then we are doing the quality control in our facilities. Some of the streams are still going to waste to energy recovery, and some of them are going to reuse. So some of the streams that are going to energy recovery is still like multi-layer jackets, or those that have loads of different mixes in the textiles, and still, even we are doing lots of quality control in our collection, still some of the textiles are spoiled during the collection. And then some of the streams are going to the mechanical processing or opening line, and then our end product is the fiber, and then the companies can do yarn or do the like the fiber to fiber recycling. Then it's the chemical recycling or composites. So there are still many different options. And here are some of our customers, or some examples to where our textiles are going. So there's a piece of jeans who is making unique denim products. So she is a remanufacturer, actually. Then is, for example, Infinited Fiber Company, who is making Infinna fiber based on chemical recycling. Then is Nordic Upstreams, who is making they are using a non-wovens in their furniture and wall panel production. There's a glow pope who is using our fibers as a filling in different products. And one is Jokipin Pellava, who is doing first we respin the fibers in Europe because we don't have the respinner operator in Finland yet, and then we bring the ready-made yarn back to Finland, and Jokipin Pellava produces towels. So if you want more information, please take contact and take a look at our webpage as well. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Very inspiring. There's a few questions. People seem to be really interested in the near infrared scanners that you have. So could you maybe explain a bit more how do you use them? How do they work? And also what happens if the scanner is not able to detect a material? Then what do you do?
Okay, well, actually, the scanner is like this. So it's a really handheld scanner, and you put your textile on top of it, and it's connected to our like mobile device. And when it's scanned, it tells in your phone that what is it, cotton or viscose or polyester. And if it says and we need to kind of set up how tight it is. So if it says that it's if there is a over, let's say, if the content is less than maybe 98% of polyester, for example, or cotton or any of these materials that it can recognize, then it's unknown. So then usually what happens, for example, if it's sorted to our cellulose-based stream, and then we use our identification, then it's like a first quality, then it's kind of cotton, for example, first quality stream, and then it's a cellulose-based stream. So then it just goes to the different end products or different recycling paths. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, great, thank you. And another question for you as well about the collection system, where everything, like all the textiles, they are collected together and then the reuse quality is taken out. Do you see an influence on the quality or the costs of the system, especially for the reuse, because then the quantity needed to be reused or sorted for reuse is much higher than if they were collected directly for reuse?
Well, we are trying to guide the citizens that bring the reusables for us, like broken and dirty ones to us, but reusables for charity companies. But because the citizens don't always act as we ask them to do, we see that it's important still to take the reusables out. And of course, it's a cost for us. It would be much easier to just put them in a line and sort by materials, for example. But we want to work as well, following the principles of circular economy. And of course, we are selling them in our Lily store, so it covers this part of the costs.
Great. Do you see an influence on the quality of the reusables? Because you mentioned earlier that there is the quality problem of the challenging climate, for example. So do you see that there's more damage to the reuse quality textiles in this collection?
Well, I should compare it maybe to charity companies' collection, I guess. So I don't really know. But one thing that I can say about the collection is that we are doing a collaboration with like a second-hand markets and like shopping malls. And when we get the collection point inside and nearby the citizens, then the quality rise up. So I don't think the collecting both reusables and recyclables in the same, it doesn't really affect the quality, but rather that where you collect. So when we are collecting our waste treatment center, the quality is not so good than when it's in a shopping mall, for example. And when we had a one collection campaign, we had a charity company's collection point and our collection point next to each other. And then we compared like what kind of, is it so that we get the recyclables and they get the reusables? There wasn't really a big difference.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see for some questions for all of you. You can choose who has the best information to answer. There is one question about the polyester dominating the fibers. Do you know if there is any textile to textile polyester processing plants already in Europe or even globally?
Sorry, that's for me for sure. So yeah, we're definitely now just doing research into viable solution of synthetic to synthetic, recycling natural fiber to natural fiber, because it's not only a question of is it possible to recycle it, but is it possible to recycle it also in a sustainable way? Because with recycling, we're also recycling the chemicals, so this can still be very problematic. But as far as we know, around 90% of recycled polyester is actually downcycled, is still made from plastic bottles. So the remaining would be made. There are definitely facilities in place, but yeah, I can give you more information once we're done with the research. And as said, that doesn't mean that it's a sustainable way of recycling.
Yes, and if I can a little bit continue, so it might be that there is something, but in my knowledge, like the chemical recycling, chemically recycled synthetics, as we have in cotton at the moment, it's not in place yet. There are many companies who are developing it and trying to figure out how to recycle the synthetics back to yarn. At the moment, most of the synthetics goes to composites or kind of yeah, well, maybe composites or they could be a part of kind of thermobonding, like a English words, that like the non-woven recycling pads where they're using thermobonding solution. So there it helps when it's melting, but the chemically recycled polyester from fiber to fiber is not in place yet.
Great, thank you both of you for your answers. Another question earlier was about how even in the conscious collections there is clothes which are made of lots of different fibers, which makes the recycling impossible afterwards. And in the packaging there is like a trend going on at the moment that monomaterial is rising, making the recycling easier. Are you seeing similar trend in the textiles industry or not?
Yes, not on a scale that we would like to. In our analysis, actually, there was only one brand, a luxury brand, Gucci, that was actually considering the end of life and has, for this reason, produced a collection from monomaterial, which could, in that case, be a solution. Still considering, I mean, this is definitely a way forward, but also the recycling technology needs to actually then catch up in order to have that recycled at the end of life. But generally speaking, we mostly see clothes made from blended textiles, and even if it's, let's say, one material, but it includes elastan, and Sini can talk more about it, but it acts as a contaminant, so that can again not be recycled again.
Yes, I totally agree. So first, we should take elastan out of all of the textiles that it's not necessary. And then the monomaterial, there are few things, for example, in synthetics. So even there would be a monomaterial jacket that everything is polyester, then there is still many kind of polyesters, and it's not even the melting point is different in with the different polyesters. So that's not a complete solution either. But that would make our job much easier if there would be more monomaterial textiles in the market.
Great, thank you. How would the data, like, would you need some kind of data to know it beforehand, especially the chemical composition? Is this where the product passport can be a solution, or how could we know what's in the textile so that you guys know what to do with it?
Yes, it's not easy answer or easy question. Of course, we would need to know what kind of materials are included. But for example, as Urska said, there, like, well, when growing, for example, cotton, there are many different quality of cotton already grown. So if it really make difference, if you would know where the cotton is grown, how it's treated, what kind of chemicals there are, what kind of colors there are in, and then also the material content. And so there are many things that are affecting the recyclability.
Great, thank you. Then there's a question about the recycled PET. We have heard today already how the textile industry is actually a big user of recycled plastic from the bottles. How do you see the impact of the textile industry on the industry or market for the rPET? And yeah, how does it influence the price, for example, and the use, and what would be how to improve that?
Do you want to answer first?
Go ahead first, please.
Yeah, well, textile industry is using a lot PET material, and it would be huge effect if now it's not allowed to use. So there should be a like it should be go slowly to take out it out of the markets if that's necessary. And in Urska's presentation, there was like in the sustainable collection of brands, they are using even more polyester or PET bottles in the recycled collection. And it's because many times the recycled fibers, mechanically recycled fibers, are a little bit less quality. So actually the PET make it possible to use the recycled fibers in fiber to fiber or from yarn to yarn or textile to textile recycling. So if we want to keep the fibers in this highest value chain of circular economy, there needs to be something that make the fiber or the yarn or even the fabric stronger and more like lasting longer. So it's not only the coin has so many sizes.
Yeah, just to add on the way we see, I mean, I can again say that we see this as a false solution, And we see that, you know, many fashion brands are turning to this as a sort of a way to say that they're doing something. And we see many of the big brands even making commitments to fully replace virgin polyester with recycled polyester by 2025 or something like that. But, you know, this doesn't actually reduce the dependence firstly on fossil fuels and doesn't actually address the issue with microplastics. These clothes will still leach toxic microplastics, and as and also, as Sini said, basically, you know, this is the reduced quality, and this is not a circular model where then that item can be recycled back to a new clothing. So it is destined for landfill, and it's just kind of pit stop on the way.
Great, thank you. Then there's a question for Tracy. Could you cite an example of municipal support for PCE? I guess that's post-consumer entity. And which form of support would you recommend?
Sure. Yeah, I read that. I assume that make the same assumption. So a really concrete example of additional municipal support is in some of the contracts between post-consumer textile collectors and municipalities in rural areas in Estonia. There are certain agreements. So in rural areas with not a lot of people and really spread apart collection points, it's not cost effective or not as cost effective to collect textiles because the amount that you get for the distance you travel, the cost equation is very different than if you're in a densely populated area. And one of the really concrete examples that happens in agreements sometimes is that municipalities will buy the bins. So the municipalities actually pay for the collection network instead of the collector themselves owning and placing the bins. Another one that I find absolutely fascinating is that sometimes municipalities will actually do the collection rounds, warehouse the materials, and the collector just comes and gets the materials that are warehoused. And these are the ways that some of these rural municipalities have been able to maintain collection networks, or at least services for their citizens, and still partner with the collectors themselves.
Great, thank you. Then a question for Sini and the EPR system, because you have already invested a lot in making the end of life of textiles happen in the whole country. What are your views of the harmonized rules on the EPR across EU?
Yes, thank you for the question. There are threats and opportunities. So the worst case scenario is that there is going to be a full scale EPR system in Finland, what means that the producers will establish their own collection and sorting network, which would be there with our collection or replacing everything we have built. And also it might be that when they are collected and sorted, they might be sent in another country so that they are not using, for example, our processing plant. But if EU or the Commission will leave a room, each state, member countries, to establish the EPR as they see it's the best way to do, then it might be that the producers only support the system that we have already built. And well, this, as Tracy said, this we have bought the collection bins and we have many facilities and sorters, lots of employees. So this is not cheap. So we would be really happy if producers would support the system already built. So let's see.
Yeah, hopefully that will happen so that your efforts are not wasted. Then what happens when the textile has been through the loop for a few times as from textile to textile? recycling, and the quality has decreased so much that it's not very usable for that anymore. Is there some plans for that already, or what would be the ideal case for the kind of plan C for the fibers when they have reached that stage?
Yes, so there is already textiles that is not good quality enough for fiber to fiber recycling. So all those examples I showed, they have different quality standards. So some of them can go to the respinning, like mechanical respinning, the longest fibers, for example, then a little bit shorter fibers, but the different quality standards. For example, the cotton content can suit to the cotton chemical cotton recycling solution. Then there's a non-wovens and also the composites. So there and the fillings. It doesn't matter really the fiber length. So there are still lots of different, and we need all of the solutions, and we need more solutions. So even I presented very beautiful stories and success stories about our customers. Still, we need lots of more companies to join.
Great, and maybe a short and last question for this webinar, still about the IR scanner. Are coatings a problem for the scanner?
Sorry?
Are coatings on the materials a problem for the IR scanner?
I didn't.
Like any kind of like coating materials on the textiles, like waterproofing?
Coating, oh yes. Because we are working with post-consumer textiles and they are usually washed so many times, so there is not really, that's not in our sorting, it haven't been very problematic. What is problematic is that it doesn't recognize elastane, for example, or it doesn't recognize the coatings. Black color has bring some problems or challenges, but the coating we don't really we haven't done like research or that kind of research about those. But interesting question. I should take a look.
Great. Thank you very much for all of our speakers. We are running out of time, and also for everybody who joined us today and submitted your questions, and hopefully you got some good answers and good new insights and inspiration. We have shared some links from our speakers in the chat. We will also share the recording and it will be uploaded in the Zero Waste Cities website, so you can refer back to that later on as well, and also the presentations will be found there. So if you want to go back to any of this, it's available there for you to have a look. And you can of course check the websites of Changing Markets, Taxroad and Lounais-Suomen Jätehuolto to take a further look on all the research and insights that have gone into this, because they have lots of reports and research also in there. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Hope to see you soon in our next webinars, which will of course happen after hopefully very relaxing summer holidays, and we'll get back to it after. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.